Welcome everyone. Today we have beautiful Nellie joining us again, returning for interview 3. How are you, Nellie?
Hi, Gabby. I'm good, thank you.
So good to have you back. Nellie is a survivor of a generational family of SRA, of MK Ultra and experimentation. And she's been sharing her experiences, her many memories that she's recollected with just this beautiful vulnerability. And you're so articulate, Nellie, in how you're sharing your experiences and really just setting the scene of what happened so we can all understand the tools that have been used by these networks to program our children into mind control slaves. And I know survivors are just getting so much out of listening to the interviews. We've had some beautiful feedback, as well as supporters that are learning about SRA and MK Ultra. And it's so interesting because even though our stories are all unique, come from different places in the world, different families, completely different lives, the underlying themes and the methods that have been used are so very similar. And I know that the overwhelming response from survivors has been, it's been so helpful for them to hear your recollections and your vast, repertoire of memories that you've retrieved, because it's helping them find the deeper layers, and they're seeing similarities in their own stories, which is allowing them to understand what's happened to them, and even to release the shame and the guilt, because they're understanding so much of what happened to them, and so many scenarios that they were involved in were so pre-programmed. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, that we're all healing together. And I commend you for your bravery and your courage to share such horrific experiences in your life for the benefit of all, for the benefit of our communities, of our survivors. And this is all about keeping our children safe, because we know that this is still happening out there at the moment. So if we're all aware of how things happen and how things look, we can be much more aware of what's happening in our communities as well. And I know speaking out is such a healing and empowering experience for so many survivors. And I would love to see this year be a year where we just completely bombard all of the platforms with our stories. And I think your story at this time, Nellie, is so important, because it's giving so many survivors the courage to keep healing, the courage to keep going, and to see that we can get through this. We all have hard days, and it can be overwhelming as memories come through. We all know that, and all the conflict with cutting abusers out of our lives, etc. But there is a point that we can get to where we can start speaking out and healing the world, healing others. And I think you just sum that up, Molly. What you're doing is so beautiful. And I would love for you to speak a little bit on how you're finding speaking out. And I know survivors have been silenced their whole lives by the programming, then through trying to report through our medical systems and our mental health system. Survivors are constantly targeted and shut down. So yeah, I would love to hear how you're finding speaking out and sharing as well.
Oh, thanks for this platform, Gabby, and for making me feel comfortable speaking out. That's so important. I'm hoping other survivors will find their voice and be able to speak out. We all know as survivors how horrendous our lives are and have been, and it's never ending. We're always left with the memories if they don't kill us off, which they often do, or cause us to suicide. And one thing that gets me through is connection with other survivors. We know how horrendous it is. And then what makes it worse even is when our communities also silence us when we're speaking out. And I know other survivors are well aware of that. It just makes us so alienated and feeling like we always have, like we don't belong anywhere. We can't relate. We can't talk about happy memories often with people. We just have to do the total rebuild when we start again and build new memories from scratch, build new careers from scratch, build everything from scratch. And I know that's just a horrendous thing as a middle-aged person to be having to do that now. But what keeps me strong is contact with other survivors, and one in particular who is a bit older than me, and that's really helped get me through. And yeah, it's like the only way is to expose this, you know, the structures, the systems, how they work, and then hopefully someone out there somewhere might know what to do about this, because the police and government certainly aren't. They target us, they silence us as well. We've been silenced all our lives, stuck in this. So yeah.
It's so true. And it's beautiful that survivors now can speak out. I know there's so many survivors, you know, doing interviews, writing books, writing poetry, creating art. And, you know, that's us getting our voices out there, and we're no longer relying on the media or, you know, police or politicians. And I think, you know, as corrupt as it is, when we look out there at the lack of support that survivors are receiving, you know, we're creating this beautiful, you know, movement out of survivors empowering themselves and finding their voices and creating goodness for the world as well. So I love that.
Definitely. Yeah, because there's so much damage done to our psyche through what we've been through, and then we're left with that to deal with such extraordinary damage to our soul and our psyche and everything, and have to live out the rest of our existence with this. And the only way is to connect with other survivors and band together to do something about this and engage with healing. I'm a weaver, and that really helps, and an artist, that also helps. But yeah, it's human contact that we're always robbed of that is really crucial to our healing, face to face with people, creating new memories, healing and hope. It's the only way. Yeah.
I love that, Nellie. It's like starting all over, starting a new life for ourselves after having such a controlled existence for so long.
And I do welcome other survivors contacting me through you when my sessions are finished, because they may need to connect the dots and help heal and gain more awareness in order to be able to speak out. And by speaking out, this is the only way we have to, in order to shut this practice down with these organizations. It's the only way. They're getting away with it, and we've got to shut them down. Someone out there will know what to do. Somebody has to. Yeah.
I so agree, Nellie. It's up to us to use our voices to create the change. We've waited so long for change to happen after these reports and so many survivors coming forward, and now, you know, it's up to us to start generating that. So I love that. Yeah. So when you're ready, please begin.
Yeah. So today I'm going to be speaking more about different operations that they did that I witnessed that show the system and structural way that these organizations work, their training of younger boys to start with, and these younger boys in turn train more, the older ones train more, so they're really multiplying and have done for many decades. So I'm going to be speaking about that, as well as where they originated from and some other things that they have done and how they do them, in order for other survivors to be able to perhaps connect some more dots in their lives that will help them speak out. So what I'm going to start with is my twin brother was targeted for a couple of reasons. We were given bicycles when we were about 8 years old. My father told me that he bought mine for 50 cents and that my twin brother's was bought for about $3.50 or $4, but who knows where they came from, but that was said. So there was always a hierarchical. And I remember being woken up one day and brought down the road where there was a gathering of boys a bit older than me and my father and my twin brother on his bicycle. And they were making him repeat going around and doing a U-turn, going up the road. All the houses right around there were under. This is what they do. This is in a public place down our street in broad daylight. Because they get bored of doing things in people's houses, they like to bring it out into the everyday and it's all things that they have to do in order to do it to advance. They have to do one of these and one of these and one of these, and the ones that they train also have to do the same similar things in order to progress through these organizations or this organization. So my twin was made to do a U-turn, come back, do another U-turn, come back. And then right at the moment, my father's controlling all the boys, and he's made to do one more. And right then my handler was there, my handler who was a couple of years older than me, 2 or 3 years older than me, named Stephen, that I was told many years later. And because I'd forgotten he had been at my school, always wiped, and then became Simon. So he was the one that when he pushed the back wheel of my twin brother's bicycle just after the U-turn, and my twin brother fell straight on his face, smashing all his front teeth. And there's a reason why this was done as well. All the boys then gathered when that was happening right around to create a blocker, just in case anyone was said to be up the road or way down the road and might have seen. So they all come in broad daylight to create that blocker surrounding. And then my father quickly marched me all the way back up to our house, put me in my room, and I was just standing there. Sometimes you stare into space. This is the effect of the drugs, and you come to. Sometimes I will bring you to by doing things in front of your eyes. If they know that you've timed out, they'll bring you back. And next thing, there's a huge noise. My father was making a huge noise, and I opened my door, and he's dragging my twin brother in a headlock through to the bathroom mirror, which I had direct sight of. We were always moved around in the bedrooms for certain events, so that in this particular bedroom I was in at the time, I had direct sight into the bathroom. And I looked, and he was pushing my twin brother's face up to the mirror, saying, look at yourself, look at yourself, look what you've done, you've ruined your face for life. Oh. Look at you, smashed your teeth, you smashed your teeth, you're going to go through life like this, which was a shock. There was blood everywhere. And I remember my twin was crying. I felt so sad for him. He later got plates and everything, which would also create a memory, because what they do is after that, I was taken to more events. So this creates something for him to concentrate on, his looks. They use the 7 deadly sins, vanity, sloth, wrath, jealousy, all of that to create in the people around the target, so that they'll have something to concentrate on themselves while other things are going on around them. So this is one tactic that they use. So then when I was taken to more things, my twin brother would be string of thoughts to concentrate on himself, how he looked, how he walked. He was always trained to walk like an alpha, you know, commanding, a bit of a strut, had lots of friends around him, things like that. So that was to create all that.
And so, Nellie, the alpha training or the alpha programming is around creating leaders within the network, is that right?
Yeah,
so
the people
I guess
well as
say alpha
deltas get alpha
or...
training, yes, and other people get alpha training as well, who are meant to be over a target and control them as well. Yes. Not just programmers and the handlers control you, they also set up other people. It's like I said, the ripple effect out and in. So you're surrounded by 2 or 3 or 4 different ripples, and all those people are bringing things in or controlling you as well to go out. These are family members, friends around you. And I was moved through my life to many of these friendship groups, circles that were set up, right through my life. So it's not just one. They can mutate, change. They're always in flux to suit who needs to be around you at that time, what things are going to be doing, how many children they have, all of that sort of thing. What's going to be happening, basically.
Wow. Yeah. It's like they've just got so many different people that they can call on that are programmed to be brought in and kind of mutually handle each other for these different events. It's just mind-blowing.
And much later on, this was done again to my twin brother. He was programmed to go to a party full of amphetamines that he didn't know about, really angry, caused to be angry, and he punched some guy that was inside, joking and mocking him and locking him out of the party. He punched him through a plate glass window. Wow. And it completely destroyed his arm. It had to have a lot of surgery. And this was around the time that I'd just been removed completely from the family home while still a child and placed and drugged into brothels, which was a cover because I was taken to something horrendous and huge in the world. And that was a way of making me out of sight. And I was there for a long time.
How old were you? How old were you at this stage, Nellie?
Pardon?
What sort of age are we talking about?
17, but the brothel started before that in my hometown. I was forced under drugging with the threat that my brothers would be killed if I didn't do it. I always thought, well, I'll get there and I'll escape. And then they would have every escape route out, you know, with men there, and there was no escape. You can't get out with the drugging and the mind control, and the men are all around you, surrounding you. They will usher you there. They were behind me on bicycles, forcing me there, saying things the whole way. If you don't keep pedaling, we're going to kill your brothers. Keep going, all that. That's how they operate with the drugging. And there's no way out of this drugging. This is drugging off a scale that people would even realize.
Wow.
Mesmerizing, hypnotics, amphetamines, benzos, LSD, even Viagra. If they want you to have sex, if they want somebody to have sex, they'll pump their system with Viagra. Laxatives, if they want someone to publicly defecate, all that kind of thing, to mock them, make them lose their jobs, get somebody else into their job. They can just move people around, like my father said, like pawns on a chess set.
Just chemical cocktails,
and on chess set. That was said to me, and in my statements from years ago. That's how they operate.
Wow.
So I never saw my brothers when I was placed into that brothel, or my mother for many, many years. They didn't even know if I was alive for many years.
No.
Yeah.
It's so sad. I'm so sorry.
But I'll come to that later. That's next decade. Just finishing off this decade at the moment. So the family holidays continued. Family holidays. Apparently my brothers potentially don't have memories of these. My twin brother has said in the past that he never went to one of the ones that I'm going to be talking about because he was fully under scopolamine. This particular one, we were about 7 and my little brothers were younger, and we were taken up north to a caravan park. They love working out of caravan parks and resorts and things like this. They work very well there. They can get mass people under, families, access their children easy. Everyone's relaxed. Everyone's drinking more, eating more food. So we're taken to a caravan park. But unfortunately, this time on the way, my father had stopped for fish and chips, and they were bad. Like they made us vomit. And he'd arranged for the twins, the young baby twins who are now 1 year old, to come up with their family as well. And something huge was going to go down with these twins. And Leeks Imposter was there. He came in. We were vomiting. And my father was saying everyone was angry. They were angry. We were just vomiting out of control. I remember Leeks Imposter sneering at me and turning on his heel in the caravan and being quite angry with my father that he hadn't done his job right and that it would have to be called off whatever they were going to be doing with the twins who were 1 year old. So we came home then, which, after a few days.
Wow, close call.
So it was called off. Whatever was going to happen was called off. Luckily for the twins.
Yeah. Wow, so lucky. It's just like a divine act of, food poisoning saved them. Oh.
Yeah. So around this time, I can remember coming back home out of another house. They used to take me to many other houses. And that's when the handler, the older leader called Doc, was talking about my destiny. And I'm having the program thoughts. I need to run. My neck is so painful from the shocks that I'm trying to look up at him, and I can't look at his face too long because he always has. These men are terrifying men, absolutely terrifying. And when I get to who they are, I think people might have more of an understanding why these men are able to terrify people so much because of their origins, which I'll get to later this session. So I was also taken to that same house sometimes, put on a beanbag, woken up, tortured, electric shocks. And that's when I was given the conversation by Leeks and Foster that that I would always never ever be able to get away. I would always be surrounded. They were setting up altered states of consciousness in me. So I'm still only 7, and they're telling me all this as I'm being walked out into the bright sunlight, which is really hurting my eyes because I've been under so long. That the altered states of consciousness were set up and saying to me things like, it's like having different personalities, but not quite. So this is not DID, which I've been diagnosed with, that I have. It's actually altered states of consciousness, but no government will recognize that. This is done by other people. DID is something that is set up by you to cope with horrendous things. That wasn't in my case, but that's what the diagnosis is, because there is nothing in the DSM-5 that will cover what we go through. They won't recognize it still to this day, even though it's a military practice and everything like that.
Wow.
And told.
And you're really talking about this is the specific splitting of a child's mind into separate parts to use those parts to program them. And that's, there's just no understanding of that within our mental health or medical system.
And I was also told that if I ever brought them out myself, I would be killed, all my parts would be killed, my brothers would be killed, my mother would be killed. I was only to be controlled by them. Things could come out, parts could come out when they decided. It was complete control. So that was a conversation that was given to me while I was being walked to the car and then driven off from there. So really, and my father was in the house as well watching. He used to love to watch my torture of this being happening and creating, because he was then being taught how to do it to others and other generations of children and all of that. So they're all training in a hierarchy.
Wow. Just that enforcement of, not even having ownership or, sovereignty or just control of your own mind. Like to have that fear in you can't go to these places, like you can't go into these areas or these parts as such. Like how terrifying for a child.
Yeah, and even being woken up in that state, I'll never forget just how sick and dazed and nauseous I was, and just an extreme pain in my head from what they were doing, and just trying to look at, my head was like this, like it almost feels like it's broken. You can't even straighten it up. So I'm being marched to the car with my whole neck on an angle because I can hardly lift it up from what they've done. It's so brutal. Yeah. And he was laughing, and that's when he started to say to me, nothing is as it seems. You'll find that your entire life, nothing is as it seems. And you will always be surrounded for the rest of your life. Like the last time I saw a handler was over 4 months ago when I'd moved to another place, just to let me know that they knew where I was. Before that, it was about a year. So they have let me out further and further now, but it's always been said to me that they will target other people that could be around me or random people on the street, which has happened before, to actually target me, showing photos of me, all that kind of thing. There's a target. You'll do this. You know, I could become homeless. They can always get into anybody's mind and turn people against me for the rest of my life. And that's what they do to us. They make our life still hell. We're never out of this.
Mm.
Once a group was done with, or a person was done with, always something would be set up. There'd be an argument or a fight, or something would be done, and then that would split the relationship. So then it's always Groundhog Day, start again. You wake up again and again to horror.
Just isolating as well, isn't it? Just constantly isolating you and turning people against you, so you know that you just don't have that support to heal, to come forward, to start, you know, empowering yourself. Like, just it's just awful.
They made me extremely isolated later, which I'll get to, from around the age of 16, 17 to my early 20s, where I was very isolated, had nobody. Really nobody. And then they slowly brought people into my life just before that, but just here and there, people set up. Some of them are no longer here. So that was always said to me as well. They'd make me get very close to somebody, and then that person would be taken, no longer in this world. Another memory would be the witness. So another thing they do is they will create you to become, or anyone to be, a witness to something. So that's bringing you out into more awareness. You're placed by a window or something to witness something. And this has been done in many of their murders, where they'll wake somebody up in a different separate house to go to the window and witness a certain car type or something like that, that will then convict other men who were innocent. And these men could also be taken to the murder site and then brought out to awareness and led to believe that they're actually committing the murder. They're there, their thoughts are implanted. Some of them may even confess to police because of the extent that these organisations go to.
It's all a setup. That really reminds me of, you know, Martin Bryant. I mean, he was obviously being trained and programmed by Tavistock personnel in Australia, you know, confessing to, you know, the horrific crimes in Hobart, and it's all programmed. And that, you know, this happens so much more than what we would ever realise. So many innocent people are in prison, and even worse.
I'll talk more about him later as well.
Yeah, I'm just like, to be stuck in prison and actually thinking that you committed this crime that you didn't, like, what an awful life sentence.
What they'll do is they'll do rehearsals. In Martin Bryant's case, he was told that he was acting, but I'll get to that later. So it was meant to be him surrounded by many other men, and he was told that he was acting in a movie, but I'll talk about that later. That's the extent they'll go to. And he was targeted for decades before that, made out to be a loner. All of that, things were done, but that's ahead of time. Yeah. They do rehearsals with the actual people. It's called a death rehearsal. So they'll all grab somebody and they'll do over and over rehearsals with it 2 or 3 times, make sure it's all good, and then do the actual thing. Wow. And families don't even know that their children are taken away for this. They're put under. They can access anybody. So this particular time, I was taken to a window with my mother by my father, and then he went out of the house, and then he appeared out in the backyard, and he had the next door neighbour's beekeeping suit on, and my mother's father was a beekeeper, so she knew all about it. So she's given me a running commentary. Oh, he's putting the head bee thing on, and then he's gone back and he's got a massive big card of bees, like swarming all over the honey, that the next door neighbours were beekeepers. And then he's taken me, he's put that in their house then he's taken me over there to stand there, and he's got the male that was next door to us lying in a bed, and he's shaken violently the bees all over him to sting him, made them angry, and then shut the door, put me back in the house by the window again. And next thing, the window was open. My mother had opened it. And next thing, he had gone back there, opened the door of where the man was. They almost stung him to death.
Oh my God.
And let all the bees out to swarm, and they all swarmed towards our house. And my mother quickly shut the window. So I was made a witness to that. So you're woken up. Many other people, anyone can be a witness, to come forward then to the police about a little bit of a memory of what they saw, whether they woken up by a bang in the middle of the night, and then the handlers have got them to go to the window and then woken them up again. They see something, then they're put back to sleep. And then in the morning, they can remember it, it's brought back into their memory. And then they can call the police on that. And so anybody can be done for anything.
Just the level
They
of
can
planning.
even go to local council, go through, they know where every CCTV camera is. They can put a person under scopolamine and other drugs, a random person that they've handpicked to run through the CCTV at the time that a murder was done, and then they will be convicted for it because they were seen at this. They find it so easy. My father would always say, this is easy, easy, easy. Repeat it 3 times.
Wow. They just know that they're untouchable, yeah? Like no one's going to pick up that they're doing.
That's why they walk around like gods. But the man next door did survive.
Thank God.
And I used to be taken over before then to know him. And yeah, his wife would make me cookies, and I'd spend some time there. It was one place I was allowed to go in those days. That was my happy place for a few minutes as a reward.
Did he just think that was like a horrific accident about the bees?
Bees had somehow got out,
Bees
whatever he was led to believe, whatever was put in his mind.
Wow.
Yeah. And then like they would do things with your teeth. So I remember being at school and made to go to the dentist, which was like a little caravan that was pulled into the school in those days, and all kitted out with the dentist chair and everything. And Leeks and Pasta was there, so it was all set up, and I had many torturous dental fillings put into my mouth, and I don't know, they were mercury and God knows what else they had in them. I don't know.
I hear that so much with survivors.
I don't know what all that was about, but I remember it was extreme pain. So I was brought out where I could feel a lot of pain. And she was like, the nurse was like a robot, and it was like she was doing it on purpose. It was in my mind. She was trying to hurt me, and it went on and on for a long, long time. And then another friend was brought out to say to me, see, I didn't get any. She didn't do that to me. I was the only one, apparently.
Oh, Nellie.
Yeah, everyone came and went really fast, and then I was in there for ages. And it was like another form of torture, the drill, and just right through my teeth.
So even the visiting school dentist was in.
Mm-hmm. And then at that school, my father would sometimes get us to attend the church, was part of the school. And he'd wait to the right moment when he knew I was looking at him, and he'd do an inverted cross, like a satanic cross in the church. And he was just going to the church to watch. He was always watching certain people to see how they were acting as they were brought out of their house under certain drugging, keeping watch. This is how they do it. Yeah. Or they would be looking, stalking other people. If they were going into the house next door, they would bring them the neighbours out of the house and always have somebody watching the neighbours to make sure they didn't go home earlier, things like that as well, if they were targeting another individual.
Wow. And we know the churches have been so infiltrated by all of these networks as well. Just makes me wonder, how, was your father working with the leader of the churches, or was he just running that operation through there without him knowing? It's just so many questions, hey, but it makes sense that, this is a community gathering. They could watch a lot of people, they could target children, target families, pick new people as well.
That's right, yeah. He was always making a mockery of everything. That's the way they operate. They hate humanity. They hate the way that people in this world operate, holidays, traveling, things like that. But I'll get to more of that later. So these people, they don't enjoy their lives. They live to kill, which is their joy. They are thinking about it 24/7. The only other thing they are thinking about is their cover and their main goals and aims, which is where they have their meetings about this. Yeah.
It's just such a sick and inverted way of life, isn't it? In every single way.
And it all goes back to the Nazi origins. Like, I can remember my father really laughing about this. He taught me and one of my younger brothers to say Mississippi backwards. Instead of MIS, SIS, SIPPI, it was IPPISS, ISSIM. And when I'd say ISS, which is a Nazi thing, he would grin and laugh.
Wow.
And he needed to continuously repeat that. It was like the Jew saying ISS. And they got a lot out of that kind of thing. They would make inversions of everything, things backwards.
Just any way to just
satanic cross. Yeah, all of that kind of thing. So I was always being gaslit as well. I can remember being taken to another friend of theirs, who knows if these people even knew we were in their houses, because they were so under. And I can remember things being set up, like waking up the next morning. It was an overnight thing. My father often attacked the other children and woke me up to that as well, making me a witness to their screams and what he was doing. In this particular time, I was woken up and he brought me and my younger brother, one of my younger brothers, to the top of the stairs. They had stairs. And he kept positioning me at the top of the stairs, and I could hear my mother and the lady downstairs who owned the house talking at the bottom of the stairs where they were placed. And next thing, my father has pushed me violently down the stairs, and my ankles were never good anyway, so I sprained and twisted my ankle. And at the bottom of the stairs, my mother said, she does this for attention.
Oh.
So things like that would happen a lot. And my mother would always say things like that and believe that about me when it was my father doing it, even if they were doing something with other friends near a car door. They would slam the car door as soon as a friend put a finger to get into the car and jam the finger in the car and make it look like it was me doing it, and I would get the blame for that as well. And then the friend would look at me like, how could you do that to me, kind of thing. And once the handlers are out of sight, it's out of your mind, because you've got this tunnel vision. That's why they say that they're kind of invisible in a way, because as soon as they do something, you can't remember every 3 to 5 to 10 to 15 seconds or whatever, depending on the timing. They can do whatever they want, walk away, make it look like someone else has done it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just under all these druggings, and they've obviously practiced and perfected.
Well practiced. They do it all. This is what they do on a daily basis. Every day they're doing these things on random people that are chosen, things like that. Yeah.
Wow.
They'll even get a plane to go down and disappear and get 200, 220 people to experiment on, put in places that they'll never be found, and they used as experiments, things like that.
Just the scope of these operations, the power of the network, it's just astonishing, isn't it? To look at what happens, you know, the few things that we know that's happened in the world, and just look at them again and understand the way the networks played their hand in controlling the situations. It's just
they're very interested in numerology as well. Like, for instance, my mother's mother was born on the 11th of the 11th, 1911. So that was an important date to them, 11/11/11. Said to be an Illuminati, said date. They make out that they're part of that and said things like that to me. So that's why she was chosen. And my mother was already born then by the time Ewan Cameron and other men had found her. So she was never a full breed, as they call you. My father said to me one day that you are the first full breed Illuminati daughter in the Southern Hemisphere. And that was something to be, yeah, that's their terminology for people, that they will play with your mind with things like that. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But that's the kind of terminology that they would give you. And that was said to me back in 2011.
Wow.
Yeah. I had this thing about being a full breed, fully under. Apparently my mother wasn't.
Yeah.
She was found, whether she was 4, 5, 6, early teens, I don't know.
Wow.
They
have this real obsession with the bloodlines and passing it all down. But that's very informative to understand that people can still be brought into these programs from outside, so from non-bloodline, and go through a lot of abuse and torture, etc., to literally catch them up with the programming.
And it is a bloodline in a way, because I was rhesus D negative blood type, and that was said to be not perfect, but okay, rhesus D negative, O negative. So I can remember early on developing a lot of asthma and nasal passage trouble. I think that's from the shoving of the tubes down the throat, doing a lot of damage, the drugging, doing a lot of damage with my nose. So I eventually became quite early on a mouth breather, really struggled with that. And that was also used as a cover so that other children would always say to me, "Are you sick?" So I was always made out to be a sickly kind of person. I couldn't breathe. Sometimes my father would give me a pinprick of cyanide, which was horrendous because your whole throat would close up and you'd feel like you were going to die. It was like breathing through a pinhole. And he'd tell me that he'd given me pinprick of cyanide, pinprick of arsenic, all that kind of stuff.
Scary.
Yeah, to make me extremely sick. And know that I was having more days off school than to be taken to other events. They would often have me have an operation, which I'll get to later on. And then I'd have a nose operation when I was much, much older, like in my 30s. And then I was taken to a horrendous event while I still had wadding and blood up my nose that was taken out just before the event. And I was told, if you bleed anywhere, you'll be kicked. So make sure you don't bleed. And then I was forced to watch an event much, much later that I'll get to later. So they would often take you straight from basically a hospital or one day recovery at home to an event. So you wouldn't even get over that operation before you were taken to an event.
It's just astonishing how much they really push the physical body as well as obviously your mind, but to its absolute brink, you know what I mean? Like to be taken straight out of hospital to another huge shock, another huge programming event. It's like they know how far they can push you in terms of your body. And unfortunately, I suppose, you know, everyone within these networks is just dispensable. So, you know, they're not concerned about pushing too far. They'd rather push too much than too little kind of thing. But just horrific.
My father said to me one day, You're lucky you were just put in a mind cage, which is like a cage around the mind, which is how they term this, what they're doing. Not a physical cage, which is where we put many of your type in an actual cage for their whole lives. So you're lucky. You're in a mind cage, not a physical cage, even though we put you in physical cages from time to time.
Wow.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that mind cage before, but it brings up all the imagery of, like, you know, the MK Ultra and the bird cage around beta slaves' heads, etc. Yeah, wow. The mind cage.
Yeah, that's how he termed it to me. Yeah. So you're always being told everything as they're doing it. Eventually, not everything to start with sometimes, like I was kept in the dark as to what their origins were till 2011, and the shock of that, and then the realization, and then the thoughts, that's why I've been so terrified of them, which I'll get to later. They would keep some things later, but yeah, they would be telling you what they were going to be doing to you, especially right from the word go. I would also witness them telling people who were about to be killed when they were woken up into an awake state what was going to be happening to them. And if they had been kept in captivity for a while, disappeared from the world, they would often keep people and children and babies in captivity. They would be telling them and torturing them for weeks, months, sometimes years.
Oh my God.
I was taken to a few where they had been in captivity for years. Some of them were even showing videos of their loved ones and their families being targeted also while they're in these caves and dungeons and out of sight.
So horrific. It's like they just take every opportunity to, you know, just destroy. And I guess with the telling people what's coming up next, there's that installation of fear, you know, the anxiety. That's part of the programming and part of creating the terror that they want to feed off as well. But how, just to hear what you've seen around that, it's just horrific, Nellie.
Yeah. So these people in their last dying moments knew what was about to happen, and the drugging that they were under was petered out so that they would be feeling the full force of what they were doing to them, the pain, the absolute extreme pain.
It's just pure evil.
Pure evil. Yeah. So another thing they did to me was they associated the colour yellow with the alphas as well as actual Selwyn leaks. So I was brought into the lounge room one day, ran in, and there was the man that I call CIA with the American accent, with the big head, tan skin, with my father, and Selwyn Leeks was by the curtain saying, but she shouldn't be seeing me, go and get her, she shouldn't be seeing me, but they were allowing me. And he had yellow shorts on then. I think I spoke about this last session. And that was to associate in future killings where the leaders were, they wore yellow suits. And that further was to cement into my mind that it was Selwyn Leeks, because I was actually told it was Selwyn Leeks. There's the colour yellow. He loves yellow. It might have been Doc sometimes later on, like in 1997, when I'm talking about that, he was in a yellow suit. And it might have been Cells Imposter at another thing I was taken to when I was about 17, a killing of a beautiful woman that other men were blamed for, and it was barbaric. And Cells Imposter was in a yellow suit. The killing of another woman who was a prostitute on the Gold Coast. These are all huge headlining things, by the way, because they make them that. They control the media. Where they started a chainsaw, and I remember it was Cells Imposter didn't want his yellow suit to have any blood on it standing right there. Then he moved back because he was directing my handler to start the chainsaw and things like that. It was horrendous. So there was always the association with the yellow to make me believe for many, many years, just in case, God forbid, if I ever got out of this, which would never happen, but they always covered all their bases. They left no stone unturned with any way that anyone would come across what they were doing accidentally. They had their men everywhere surrounding. Everyone was under. If they were at work or wherever, they would have people stalking them there. It was
just
horrendous.
the level of planning. They've just got it all
Highly
right.
organised.
Yeah, and they'd have teams there if someone happened to walk into this situation, it could take care of it, no doubt, as well.
It's just a case of just throwing some scopolamine in their eyes and their nasal passages, and they're under. That's that quick. Get them in a headlock, force some food into their mouths. I've heard that being done too to people that live next door to me.
Wow.
And they made sure that I heard, because it was all staged. It was all to make me know how they were doing things.
It's
Everything.
like they like to brag. I was just gonna say, it's like they like to brag. Just, we can do this. We've got control of this. This is how it's all done. It's like they take such pleasure in, you know, being able to just run their evil out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
Sickening.
So back to the family home. All of us children were always pitted against each other. Sometimes my younger brothers would be allowed out with other people that were brought to the house, friends of my father and mother. Who knows if they were actual friends or completely under, to take one or the other younger brother out for ice cream. They would have ice cream shops set up with their handlers at first, who would make little holes in the ice cream and pour drugs into them, so that when you licked the ice cream, you were being drugged as well. They would use this in resorts that I'm going to get to later.
Wow.
So it was all, and then it was like a double-edged sword. So you'd go out, have the ice cream, a nice time with somebody, but then you'd be drugged. So then awful things would happen that night to you. So there was always the joyful stuff that would happen, but it wasn't. It was a catch. There was always a catch to that. And then you would be taken out of the house that night. I would often see my two younger brothers being marched out of the house, walking under scopolamine and other drugs with no memory, put in the car and driven off. Hear the car doors slamming, I'd be driven off in the middle of the night. My father would always make sure that I was awake for that. He would come and push me awake, snap me awake, or put a battery on my genitals or my tongue or whatever to wake me up, whatever would wake me, to witness and open my door to witness my brothers being walked out as well. And then I would have the program thought, oh, I'm glad it's not me, and then feel guilty about that. So there's always that guilt as well.
Yeah. And there was no way for you to stop it either. You know, it's just that powerlessness of being completely unable to help the other children around you as well, which leads to...
He'd do it with the wishbone as well. So he'd dry out the wishbone of the chicken. We'd all put our finger in. He'd choose two of us. Whoever won the wishbone would get a reward, he'd say. The reward was being taken out that night.
You just can't win.
No. He'd often fling open my door of my bedroom and scream out, I hate you like I hate my mother. So what he'd done was he'd made me into his mother for longevity. He hated his mother. This is an organisation that hates birth, but I'll get to that later. They want to control birth. They hate anything to do with birth, mothers, motherhood, families. They see that as a complete waste of time. These are militarised men. They want a different way for the world to be run. People born into captivity and controlled and all of that, and wiping out mass populations and starting again. But I'll get to that later. So he said to me, my mother would one day die and then I'll have you because I've made you into my mother. So it's giving him longevity to torture. So he always saw me as his mother, which is why he was so hateful to me all the time, because when he saw me, he just made me into his mother, who he absolutely hated with a vengeance. But he would put on a big show of being kind to her and nice to her around other people, sometimes around me. Yeah, we were often shunted away out of my nana and granddad's kitchen, where he would have them under and talking with them, and all sorts of things were going on. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was nonstop. I can remember one night being brought into my nana and granddad's room, who we had asleep, and he's got a hammer, and he's making his mother, my nana, raise her arm. And she is very slowly raising her arm like this in bed, lying down. And he's hammering her knuckles, belting, like even holding her arm up with one arm and belting her knuckles. And later on, she'd always talk about her rheumatoid arthritis. So everything always had a cover, and she'd have huge purple knuckles. My mother also had this done to her as well, and I did as well, much later. I remember waking up one day in my 40s, and my entire arm in the middle was on a bend because of being karate chopped repeatedly. Appreciating. They would do this, and I would even raise my arm for them to do it under horizon drugs and programming. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And after that, when he'd finished with the hammer, he actually did something much worse to her, which absolutely shocked me, and I won't repeat it. It's just too much. While he kept standing back and looking at me and laughing, and then doing it again with my granddad right in the bed next to her. And it was pretty shocking for an 8-year-old. I was about 8 years old then. And then on the car ride home that night, we were all crammed into the back seat, all four of us. And I remember he turned around while driving the car, and still driving, belted the living daylights out of my most tortured brother. And then when we arrived home, I remember just looking out the window. I just couldn't cope. I just remember looking out the window and realizing that this happens all the time, because when you're under all the time, you keep waking up into this and waking up to this. It's like, is this really happening? Is this really happening all the time? Yes, it's happening. You've just got to get through it. I remember getting out of the car, and he sent my two other brothers inside, and me and my most tortured brother were made to stand by the boot. And he said, you both better behave, or we'll be taking you back to Lake Alice. So that was always said as well.
How terrifying. I just feel for your little minds, your little bodies, just going through all of this anxiety, these constant horrific events. It must have just been so completely tiring, completely breaking and exhausting on you. And yet, you know, children you just have, like you said, you just have to keep going. There's no other way except through. There's no escape.
Another time with my most tortured brother, he and my other youngest brother were put on the roof, and my father had them under drugging, and he kept telling my most tortured brother, yelling out, I was stood to watch, how much he hated him over and over, telling him to jump off the roof. And they'd given them some type of LSD as well. And my most tortured brother repeatedly jumped off the roof until eventually he actually landed and broke his arm. And my mother wanted to take him to the doctors straight away and saying, oh, he's broken his arm. And she wasn't allowed to. He told her, no, you're not to take him, and yelled at her. She eventually grabbed him and ran up the road, as she was programmed to do. Everything's under programming. And who knows what happened up there. I remember having the thought, oh, the car will pick her up. But I do have a vague memory later at some stage of his arm in a cast. So I don't know how long he had to go like that with it, like that, before it was actually put in a cast. But that's just a very vague memory.
That's just another way of torturing a child, is to withhold medical treatment, especially when they've caused the injury to start with. Poor brother.
Yeah, that's what my father would do when he poked my ears with things, and then come in much, much later with medicine, to the point that I always thought that men gave medicine at that age, not nurses or women. So I remember being taken to another family holiday, and it was in Gisborne, and we walked into a big resort, lots of children. There was trampolines. We'd never seen anything like it before. Little pools, lots of little dwellings everywhere, like it was a resort in Gisborne. And pretty soon after arriving, we're all made to follow my father. Along the way, I think my two younger brothers dropped off somewhere, and then it was just me with my father, and then all of a sudden in front of me is Leeks and Foster. I remember feeling horrified to see him. And I remember running away, and I found my other brothers near the trampoline where we weren't allowed a turn because there was someone on there that wouldn't get off. And she was an alpha. And I was later told that that was Selwyn Leeks' daughter, but I'm not sure if she was. There was always smoke and mirrors with things, the actual Selwyn Leeks. So then we were brought by my father to get ice creams. I remember thinking, I don't want an ice cream. I don't want an ice cream. I don't want one. Having a program memory, drugs, this is not good. And one of the handlers was in, one of the older men, dark hair, white skin, burly, bigger man that I knew, was in the ice cream caravan. And my father's handed me the ice cream, and I was thinking, I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to have it. I'll try and find a bin. And he's like, eat it, lick it in front of me. And it has little holes in it with liquid in there.
You just knew it was coming.
He's handing them out to everyone. Like, all the kids are having their ice creams. They're all drugged ice creams. The whole resort has been drugged.
Wow.
Other handlers are around. I remember just after eating the ice cream, my mother and youngest brother was put in the actual place that we were staying in. I don't even remember being in there. That's how fast the effect of the ice cream took. The next thing I remember was being woken up, and we're just getting out of a car. We're standing by the side of a road, and my neck's really hurting. There's obviously electric shocks has happened, and there's a huge crane. And my little brother's with me, my twin brother's with me, other handlers are there, my father's there, Leeks and Foster's there. It's said to be 2:00 in the morning. And my father's turned to me and said, this is a game. See that box below the crane? And it was over an ocean. You're going to be getting in that box, and it's going to go in the ocean, and you're going to die in there. This was also done to my most tortured brother as well after me. And I remember being in the box, being put in the box, the cranes come down, it swung around the box right at the right height, get me in the box. I'm put in the ocean. I remember the water seeping in.
How terrifying.
Yeah, and I'm brought out, and I'm freezing cold. My clothes are saturated. It's very cold in New Zealand, and in the middle of the night, extremely cold. So I'm shivering, which is keeping me more awake, which is what they want. My little brother's he's put in apparently for longer than me. That said, he's brought out gasping, we're just like drowned rats, standing there freezing. Before that had happened, another man had come over, a younger boy, 15 or so, it was said to me he was 15 at the time, and he's in the Navy. They're asking him about how his Navy job's going. He's sneering at me. He's talking about his work, how he loves it. So they were getting their men into the Navy quite early, even before that. And it was also said that trucks were blocking the road because this younger boy, 15, was saying, what if someone sees? What if someone sees? And they were saying, no, we've got trucks blocking both sides of the road. So this was what they would do in order to do something. In an everyday public place, they would use trucks to block traffic. They would have a set time. Everything was timed, and I'll get to that later, the importance of the timing and where their origins are.
Wow, it's just so highly, highly organised and planned out.
Mm-hmm. So I remember being taken in the middle of the night with all of my brothers to Lake Alice, and I remember looking around. I could move my neck a little bit, it really hurt, but looking around and seeing my twin brother put in a bed, my two other younger brothers in another room being put in their beds, the like very flat, hard hospital type beds they were. There's a huge screen in front of me. I'm having things put on my head, something in my mouth. It's Doc or Leeks and Foster, I can't remember. I think it was Doc. He's talking like he does in his droll kind of monotone voice about what he's going to be doing. He has a kind of voice to him. Next thing, I'm being forced to watch the screen, and there's like I think it started at 9, 8, 7, all the way down to like a cross, and then there's like bomb blasts, everything that I'm woken up to, repeatedly, explosions, helicopters, and this went on and on for weeks. So this is to do sleep deprivation.
Wow.
Really breaks your mind. This is just before I'm termed to be a full beta slave, age 9.
At 9 years. Oh my
Not even 9 at that age. I was still 8. This is all the torture that went towards it. So this was done many, many times.
Wow.
And it's just horrendous to be woken up all the time knowing that you're not really sleeping, you're exhausted, and all this stuff in the screen, your face to it, you can't move, you're paralyzed, you can't move your arms or your legs or anything. It's all different timed drugs that are making you awake. Yeah.
Just having those visuals of just horrors played out to you as well, just to put your mind under so much pressure. It's just awful. And we know they use sleep deprivation to really make the programming go in more, make our brains just so much more susceptible to, all of this horror and pain and trauma, to split it even further. So, Nellie.
Well, a beta slave is a sexual slave, basically. So things were done quite early on, like my father brought another man handler around, who was another man who worked at Wellington Mental Hospital called JP Pisani. So he was impostering this other man called JP Pisani. So he was always called Pisani. So there was leaks, which has connotations with having a leak, and Pisani, which is piss. And I can remember being in the car with another girlfriend, 2 boys who were from Hong Kong that were said to be Pisani's sons from the wife that he was with, whether they were his boys or her boys only. She was a Hong Kong national. These are boys that are from Hong Kong. And Pisani is being driven by my father. And my father's saying, piss, Pisani, piss, why don't you change your name? They're having a big discussion about that. I'm woken up about that. We're being driven to have drugged milkshakes and ice creams, things like that. And on the way, the 2 boys, the older boy, a bit older than me, the Hong Kong boy, has a porno magazine. So this is a way to sexualize us quite young. They do this to many boys. He's speaking in a really bad way about women, how the new words for me was sluts, whores, things like that I would be later called as well. And in my mind as under programming. And so we're driven to get milkshakes and things like that. And much later on, when I'd moved to another town, same thing would happen. And then I would be brought back, put on the pool table that we had then. And this boy was being encouraged to rape me as a boy, still as a boy, and he had to do it. Yeah, and I always was dressed in like red shorts, which was my beta color. So these kind of things would happen. These would be little trips that my father would take. So then Pisani's imposter was brought into the picture. He was a pretty terrifying man as well. I can remember my mother coming into another bedroom that I was moved into, because we'd all do musical chairs with the bedrooms. in a hierarchy and according to events that were going to happen. And he would tell her to go away, stop being nosy, or he would put her in a hospital, not the hospital that she knew because she was a midwife or nurse at that stage, but a different type of hospital. So she was always being told that if she didn't stay away from this, that would happen to her as well. Yeah.
So much control, isn't it? Just all the threats and coercion, the fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I remember in the car, I said there was a friend with me the first time when I was still only about 8. She was meant to be staying the night with me. I remember my father coming into my bedroom, taking her out of my bed, and she was taken away with those boys and some of my other brothers. And then she was returned much later. I was woken up for that. She was crying. I remember asking her, what's wrong? What's up? What's wrong? And then all of a sudden, she was out to it. She was asleep. I'm going crying, just asleep. So whatever horrific thing had happened to her, then she had no memory of it by the time she woke up. And my father was very interested in her and her family. She had 5 or 6 brothers and sisters in her family. So he was often going over to that house with his men to do things while the parents were put under.
Wow.
And these are all people that were handpicked. These families were brought from other towns to our town before I was even brought there, I was told. It was already set up. They'd already set up the ideal families to have that they could target. Yeah.
They've obviously worked out what they need. Perhaps it's the children's ages, or whether they've got a programmable bloodline and they just get taken into these programs. It's just so horrific to hear, children being programmed to use other children as part of their programming. So very sad.
They would even program people from all over the world to go on a holiday destination in another country where they would be killed. Wow. Yeah. It's that easy for them with their methods and how they operate and their manpower, how many men they have, which is growing in numbers and strength and new ways since then and way before then.
But decades of experience and experiments to know what works, right?
Yeah. I remember my mother sent me up the road to have my hair cut, very, very short, and said to be like a boy. I didn't like it. My father had fattened me up a little bit before then. I thought my face was too round, and it was very, very short. And I remember at the kitchen table, he was encouraging me to eat a lot. It was almost like he was fattening me up or something. Something was going to be happening. Yeah, so I remember going to a woman that I didn't even know. I'd never been there before, but allowed to go there on my own to get my hair cut. She was already programmed to cut it that way. My mother just said it was going to be cut, and she cut it extremely short, to a shock and surprise to me. So I never had any control over how I looked, what I wore, any of that. So yeah, my hair was really, really short. Around that time, I was also set up and programmed to have same-sex attractions, things like that, very young. And this is something that they have progressed to doing with other people in this day and age, where they will program somebody to have a complete sex change that otherwise may not have had one. This is the power of the drugging. Put those thoughts in their head quite early, quite young, and they can even control someone to have a sex change where they may not have done that.
Wow.
That's how powerful these drugs are and the mind.
That's incredible. And it's such an attack on a person's identity as well, on their sexuality, because that's such a deep part of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Around this time, even though I had babysat at age 7, other people's babies that I spoke about last session, my father brought a 10-year-old girl into our family home, said to be the new babysitter for us, which I found quite odd. She had a surname of some children that went missing in Australia many, many years ago. So this is what they will do. They will bring back names from all eras in different roles. So she was a babysitter / date for my father. So my father would create an argument with my mother. My mother would all be dressed up in her high neck and her pearls and everything and her makeup done, ready to go out on a date with my father. He would cause an argument with her, tell her he was going to pick up the babysitter, bring her over, and then tell my mother that he was taking the 10-year-old babysitter out on the date instead. And her mother and father did not even know this was happening. And then she was mesmerized to have long conversations with me when my father, on other occasions, did take my mother out, that she was in love with my father. She was 10. She got a bit older as we went on, a couple of years. Yeah.
Wow, so she was around for a while.
My father, who was her teacher later on at high school.
Wow.
And she always said that she was a loner. She didn't make friends very easy. She was so targeted, and she was just infatuated with my father. She lived for any attention that he gave her. Later on, when she was 15, 16, and I was about 11, she came and found me in another town when I'd been moved later, and told me that she was pregnant and alluded that it was my father. And I went in around 2014, 15, when I got this memory through, I went and found her on Facebook and found that she had the son. And she'd also said that she was going to name the son when she was 16, the same name as my twin brother. And there it is, same name as my twin brother, and the splitting image of my father. And in 2014, I sent photos to the family members, all the family members, with his photo and my father's photo, and you cannot hardly tell them apart. They're a splitting image.
Oh my God.
She was moved overseas after that as well. I never saw her after she was 16 and I was 11. I didn't see her again.
Just another young life destroyed, changed.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the school, at my school that I went to then, the Catholic school, always taught by nuns until a certain time when a male lay teacher suddenly came. Extremely charismatic, funny. He took a liking to me for some reason. Always used to bounce into class like he was on speed. That's what I think now, which he probably was. He was programmed and part of it, but not part of the organisation, but brought in. And I remember the nun being quite upset that he was there because it was always taught by a certain Catholic nun. And he had a competition with us after a little while. We were all split into groups, and 9 of us won the competition, which was a holiday with him.
Oh, wow.
And it was in Lake Taupo, and he had, it was called then his own beach batch or something. And he was a bachelor as well. So he was a man that had never had a partner or anything, extreme interested in children. Yeah, lots went on in their classroom then. And I remember my father being very excited on the morning that we're all going to meet at the school at this teacher's car and be driven by him to his batch. And I'd been given a red sleeping bag, of course, red. I remember being suspicious that my father's very excited and in the bathroom with me and my twin brother saying what an amazing holidays it's going to be. And I remember feeling a bit weird, wondering what's going on, happy but not happy. We got to the car, me and two other girls had to sit in the front seat on the one front seat, which I and the one girl's younger sister all both sat on one of her knees because she was a larger girl. And then there was 6 in the back seat, all piled in, like a really overcrowded car, but that doesn't matter because we had convoys everywhere we went. There were men handlers in front of the car, behind, to make sure this car arrived. And my father was at the boot with this teacher. I remember feeling suspicious again. And then we've driven off and out of our mind, and chat is happening. He's very engaged with us, giving us Minties that had little pinpricks in them, you know, little bits of drugging in the Minties. Yeah. We've arrived and someone has suddenly said, he's got out of the car and someone said, my mum said to make sure we all look around and make sure there's other houses around here. We can sort of see a house there, but it's covered by trees or something. So there's the house that we're going to on the left, and then there's part of a house that we can see. So we breathed a sigh of relief. Some of them are feeling tense. A lot of them have been given instructions apparently from their parents. One person wasn't allowed to go, but yeah. So we gone in, and the first thing that one of my friends said was, this bathtub looks too small for him, like it was like a child's bathtub. Why would he buy a house with a bathtub that he wouldn't even fit in? So there's all this stuff going on. And next thing we're all stood in the lounge and we're just standing. Some of us are staring into space and coming out. And he's gone into the kitchen to bring us drinks, L&P. And one of the boys refused to drink it. And so he got water and he was yelled at. And I remember that was the first time we started to feel something's not right here. We're drinking our L&P. And then he's making us a Milo. So something else is going into the mix. Often you'd have one drink and one food and then another drink with something else. So there's something else time to go in the mix. Shutting the kitchen door. We can hear the spoon rattling really fast. That's bringing us into awareness. Yeah, he's making us Milo. He's making us Milo. He's promised us fish and chips. That never eventuated. After the Milo, we went to sleep. So the next thing I remember is being kicked awake. And there's one of the boys that refused to drink the L&P, just had the water, is to my right, propped up against a couch, and he's crying. And the teacher's yelling at him saying, if you keep that up, I'll take you back to the car with those other men. You don't want to go back there, do you? And he's crying and saying no. And then he's moved part of his pants, pajamas, and I've seen his penis, and it was purple and broken.
Oh my God.
Broken his penis. Next thing, the teacher's saying to me, you shouldn't have seen this. You shouldn't have seen this, even though I'm being woken up under instruction to see it. My heart's beating like a million miles an hour. And next thing, through the door come 2 other men, and my head's cut short. And one of the men saying, I like that one, I like that one. And the teacher saying, but this one's a girl. No, I want her. I want her. I'll have her. That's the one I'm choosing. So we're like pieces of meat. So next thing I'm woken up. First of all, he's given me an injection in my arm, the teacher. He's gone into the kitchen. There's noise. There's someone speaking to him through a window. So there's men obviously out there instructing him. He's injected me in my arm. Next thing, I've woken up on the bed with 2 other boys. There's what I would later find out to be amyl nitrate being passed around. And it's just absolute horror, to the point that my pajama bottoms were taken off me, rammed so hard into my mouth by the man that was doing me. I'm basically upside down on the bed. They're taking Polaroid photos, get her up into this position, all of that. I tried to scream. Next thing, he stuffed my pajamas into my mouth, and I couldn't breathe through my nose. I was a mouth breather. It's knocked my teeth wobbly too, which had to be fixed later. And he's broken my finger. When he grabbed my pajamas, my finger somehow got caught up in it, and this finger here is still broken to this day. And next thing, I started to throw a fit. At first, in my mind, it was like, do that thing where you can disappear and you don't feel it, but I couldn't do it, and kept coming to it. I'm fitting, my whole body is moving automatically, and I'm suffocating. And next thing, whoever's outside watching has seen that and seen, how are you going to, this was said later, how are you going to explain a dead girl, one of your dead students, to the teacher? So the teacher's being forced to race through, say, stop, what are you doing? Pushed him out of the way and grabbed the pajamas out of my mouth, took my pulse. And I remember trying to play dead. And next thing, my arms just flicked because he knew I was still alive, still awake. I was okay. And then I'm placed back on the bed, woken up again to witness what they were doing to the boys. Having more amyl nitrate, which I would find out later when they brought it around me. Many years later in my life, I smelt the same smell, and it was told to me it was amyl nitrate. So that's why I know it's amyl nitrate now. Do you want more of this? All of that. Next thing, I remember being carried off the bed and just dropped onto my sleeping bag, and then leg flicked over the other leg, and I remember just fading and going to sleep. Next thing I remember is being woken up late, sun's fully in my face, I'm in a sweat. Some of the other kids were standing around me saying that I was saying things in my sleep and yelling out, and they were worried about me. And then all of a sudden it's rush, we're going to the swimming pool. And I remember being in a daze, not feeling good, standing up, and all of a sudden the teachers come bouncing in. Who's got a headache? Who wants a Panadol? I remember I must have been in a beta switch, because all of a sudden my hip came out and I went on in a kind of pose and said, I will, like that, in a commanding voice. And everyone's looked at me like they hadn't seen that before. That's just one of my altars that they've created. And next thing, at the swimming pool, and I'm not wanting to get changed into my togs. Something doesn't feel right. And next thing, I can start feeling pain in other places, extreme pain. And I'm standing there, everyone's in the pool, and I've gone out, and the boy that only drank the water with a broken penis is standing to the side, not in the pool. He's been ostracized and yelled at by the teacher and made fun of, and he's still standing there crying. The other boy had stood back in the house, and all of a sudden his face felt like he felt something. So there's lots of things are going on. On the way back in the car, trying to sit on my hands, even with a broken finger. Someone had pointed to a big welt on my arm, one of the girls, and said, there's a pinprick in it. Must have been a big mosquito. Next thing, the teacher has rammed the gear stick against my knee. I'm squirming all the time. I can't sit still. I couldn't ride my bike after that. I had to pretend to ride it. I had to stand up and ride it. I had the men in cars go past me with the thoughts, if I tell, they're going to kill me. If I tell, they're going to kill me. If I say anything to anyone, if I cause any attention coming towards me, because I don't know what I'm going to tell. I can't sit down. I don't know why. Yeah. And the men in cars are going past me, leering, sneering, laughing. In those days, it was a silver car. They normally stick to white. silver, sometimes black, but that's a death car. But it's normally white or silver, or sometimes it would be a blue car that I'd be driven around in. And they wouldn't be their own cars. They'd be people that owned these cars that were put to sleep. So there's never any record of them owning a car that's been driven to anywhere. It's always other people's cars that are put under, that they take their cars. Everything's organised that way. So I remember walking home and my twin brother seeing me walk the bike home. It was a blue bike, not red in those days. I'll come to that later about something else. And he said, oh, tell Dad and get the puncture fixed. You must have a puncture. And I'm like, no, don't tell Dad. It's not a puncture. I just felt like walking. I couldn't even say anything to my twin brother. I knew not to say anything, and had to cover up that he even knew that I was walking home. And I just had to say that I was, yeah.
And meanwhile, you were in so much pain and you just knew that you could take it to anyone because things would just get worse. It's such an awful position for a child to be in.
At 8 still. Yeah. And when the teacher first dropped us off, he first dropped the boy with a broken penis off. He just ran so fast up his driveway. He almost fell over his gate, crashed into it. And the teacher laughed at him, and a couple of others laughed just as well because it looked funny, but they didn't know what had happened to him. And the teacher made a joke like, gee, he's really keen to get home in a hurry. Must have been a great holiday.
Oh, what an evil man.
Then my father had stared at me, glared at me like death stared me when I walked into the house, and my twin brother had gone in first and really happy, went up to my father and got yelled at by my father, and I could see the tears in his eyes because that's the only thing that happened to him. He just got, back at the batch, he was pointed to and said, leave him alone, with under instructions to leave him alone. So certain boys and me were targeted. That's why my hair was cut short for it. And the others were all told, no, they're out of bounds. Oh, his father's a doctor, don't go near him. We've been told.
Wow.
So it's organised that way as well.
Also planned so they could get away with it. I wonder what that poor boy's parents thought about his injuries, like how horrific.
Well, they would have been put to sleep. He only had a mother, which is why he was targeted. So he didn't have a father in his life, and they would have been put to sleep. Who knows? The handlers would have been in the house already by the time he got home. He would have gone into more horror. And then when I got home and I was put to bed, my father came and got me out of bed straight away, and I was taken for more electric shocks. So it didn't end there. I remember having the thought, not only has this happened to me, now I have to endure more. This is to make you, to really break you and build you up into something else. And then so I was taken away to Lake Alice, more electric shocks. And then in the following days, I don't know how many days, I remember waking up and something passed out of me. And I remember going to the toilet and it was a rolled up wad of something covered in blood. So they actually put things into your rectum to make the blood not apparent to start with. And I remember calling to my mother to come and help me. She looked into the toilet in absolute horror and went away to get my father. And I'm like, no, don't get him. You help me. You're a nurse. Because by then she was allowed out to work in a local doctor's place where they were also using her to source people and new families and babies. So she never came back to help me. So I was left with it on my own. So I remember quite a few times going to school, riding my bike, standing up, and then walking at home because I didn't want kids at school to see me riding my bike, standing up, and ask questions.
Oh, Nellie, it's just so awful to hear how isolated you were and that there was just no one to witness all of this horror that was happening.
I remember at school trying to sit on my hands in the early days that I was there. the teacher going from being very nice to me before that, and making me almost be the teacher's pet to being the most hated one in the class. So those hierarchies would always change as well. And then after that, my twin brother was put upper class into another classroom to split us up. That was the first time we were split up in the classroom, so that he wouldn't be aware of things that were being done to me in future.
Isolated again, just
until the next thing happened, which I'll get to. Yeah. So soon after that, now 9, I was taken to Australia for a big event, and this is a new way that I was forced to witness of their operation and how they operate. So I was taken to like an upstairs hall, which I now know was like a surf club. I didn't know what that was back then because we didn't have them, or I was never taken to them in New Zealand. Where I lived was not near a beach, even though I was taken to Foxton Beach a couple of times, never to anything like this. And I was stood with a door behind me, woken up in that position, and the handlers are everywhere. There's handlers everywhere, including my handler, who was a few years older than me. So this is their training as well. This may have been a rehearsal. I was taken to many things that were rehearsals, as well as many things that were actual murders. But I'll get to more of that later. So the handlers are talking about the music's being turned off. There's a whole lot of people, normal people, standing like statues, all in different positions and just standing, and there's many handlers next to them. And as soon as one starts swaying too much, going to go down putting their hand on the shoulder, stopping them from swaying. Some of them are talking in their ear, telling them to stand up straight, stand up straight, stand up straight. Everything's repeated 3 times. There's quite a few people, maybe 15 or more people in the room. Then I notice, and the handlers, a lot of them are turning and sneering at me, making sure that I'm watching, making sure that I'm awake, bringing me out into more awareness if I've gone under. A young girl, a bit older than me, is walked to a window, and I'm walked near her, and they're pointing to a car in the distance, I don't know which one, telling her to walk and hitchhike, but a car will pick her up and then go down, and then a handler's taken her down. And then a boy's brought over to the window to have a look as well, and stuff is said that that's her boyfriend or something, or close friend. Then I'm woken up again. I don't remember exiting that place. And I'm taken out of a car into the road, on the road side, not the footpath side, and into a green van. And there, crouched in the van next to me, is that girl, and she's sniffing. And I'm being told to, the handler that put me in the car, in the van, has told me to assume the position, which is on my haunches. So I've got to, and then the van starts, and I've got to, like, all my concentration is on staying upright. And every so often I'm sneaking a glance at this girl. She keeps sniffing, which gets my awareness onto her. I keep remembering that she's next to me when I'm going in and out. And next thing, Pisani's imposter is in the the passenger seat, and he's talking, and he's turned around, and I've realised with a shock who he is, because he's so terrifying and awful. He's got really mean eyes, they all do. And he's talking to her and saying, do you want to see your mummy again? And all this kind of stuff. And she's sniffing and nodding. And he's threatening her, you're never going to see your mummy again. We're going to kill you. And then I realised the other voice talking is a family member's voice, who I'll say at the moment. So we're being driven to a place, and then the next thing I remember is being in another car. I don't remember getting out of that van, getting in another car, being in a brownish or silver or something neutral car. It's a station wagon, and she's in the back seat with me. She's been taken out. We've pulled up at a forest. The family members got out. There's talk about a steel wheel brace for the car, what he's going to do with it to her. She's led away into the forest. I have been brought out to witness this as well. It's freezing cold. Another family member with a steel wheel brace and another man had gone into the forest, two of them. I'm then put back into the car with another handler watching me from the outside. I remember almost going to sleep, trying to curl up into the car, underdressed. She's never come back. And the family members hopped in to drive with Pisani, and they're driving away talking about their kill, and then I've gone out to it. Next thing I remember is being in another car, but I'm in the front seat, which was rare. And Leek's imposter is in the back seat, and I'm trying to turn around when he's talking, but my neck is really hurting, but I've glanced at him. And that's when he was talking about scopolamine, spelling it out, calling it Polly. And I'm like, Polly, that's a girl's name, referring to some Navy ship back there that we've apparently just got off, but who knows if that's true. I don't remember how I was travelled then over to Australia and back to New Zealand, but they're alluding to the fact that it was a Navy ship. Into my father, saying things like, they're the only people over this way, their organisation's the only organisation that's working this way, referring to the police as the police with lice, how they have no idea that they're operating like this, that the only other place over in the Southern Hemisphere is South America, but they just kill their own with it, using scopolamine just to kill their own, they're no threat. How the whole world is their playground, they would say things like that. The whole world is our playground. They call it their playground. What they're doing, the killing, is like a playground. And things like that.
Wow. It's like they look at the world just as a set for all of their horrific crimes that they're committing.
Yeah. So that's when I first heard Polly, thinking, Polly, that's a girl's name. Before I was brought back anyway, they always take you to 2 or 3 things by then. I was taken to what I now know to be the site of the family operation, which I was told a family member was taking over the running of that and the Great White Brotherhood, because whoever it was before then was just going to get caught. They weren't running it properly. So they had their organisation take over it. And that was used as a training ground for their men, as well as Antarctica. I remember being at a playground and Sel's imposter, Selwyn Leek's imposter's there, and there's all these kids just standing there. And all of a sudden, he's clicked his fingers and said a few words, and they've all jumped into action on monkey bars and everything. And he's going, look at me, I'm a magician. I'm such a magician. This is what I can do. Aren't they beautiful? Look at them, all under my control. Aren't they beautiful? They're just perfect. I'm perfect. I remember having this well of hatred towards him. And then he said, and you're not, you're just ugly, or something like that. You're just ugly. And then after that, I was taken into a white house and down some stairs into like a basement or something. There was bean bags placed there. I had my handler, Stephen, the older boy, with me, and he's directed me to sit on one of the bean bags and go down the stairs, and it's to the left, another room, like a little alcove room. And he sat on a bean bag, and then after a little while, he said, we're going to be getting up soon. And then next thing I could see a woman with blonde hair being led in with another man, and they're being directed by another person to kick the hell out of those kids. And they had to, or else other kids would be hurt. I can remember all the screaming happening. And then Stephen said, that's our cue, get up. And I remember having to follow him towards where all the noise was. And then I just blacked out.
Oh my God. Just monsters.
it's just terrifying. They're just a terrifying organisation, and they just live to kill. They get off on it. It's the only thing that brings them joy.
It's like they've lost all of their humanity through their actions, and it's now just about them getting the thrill out of the evil that they do. It's just no humanity there whatsoever, and I think that's what people find hard sometimes when they're just starting to learn about MK Ultra and SRA, is like, how can people do this to another human? When you look at these people, it's like there's nothing human left about them anymore. They've just completely given themselves over to pure evil.
And then I remember being told that I'm in the UK. So somehow they've got me to the UK, and I'm going to see something that I've never seen before. And this massive train comes by. We're outside, and I have a handler with me. I think it's Doc, and they did a swap because Leeks and Foster was inside the carriage that I was taken into, and he had an older boy with him. And then Doc swapped with Leeks and Foster. They're sneering at me. There's other people in the carriage, and they're all just standing like statues. And Doc or Leeks and Foster's saying none of them are going to be able to help him. And there's a boy standing there, like a teenage boy. And he looks terrified, absolutely terrified. And I'm being told to stand still, stand still. The train takes off. I'm made to stand upright, hold on to something. And then I'm being brought back. I'm in New Zealand again, and it's some time later, a few months, I'm in a new town by then. And I moved when I was 10, 11 to this new town just before I turned 11. And it must have been around my birthday, before I'm 11. They brought the boy into a cave. Before that, I'm taken to the top of the cave where a younger boy, older than me, but one of them is keeping watch and telling me about the view, how he's keeping watch. My father's got a torch. It's dark. He's given the torch to my father. We then go down into the cave, and as soon as my father stands at the back of the cave, I assume the position, thinking that I have to get on my knees and do my beta slave thing. And he says, no, not right now, because he'd bring other men in as well. That's not what's going to happen this time. Something else is going to happen. Two boys bring the boy from the carriage in the UK into the cave. He's told by my father, who then leaves me, and I'm placed a little bit closer, and then he's gone up to the boy, told him to stand up. And the boy is saying, I can't because the cave is stooped over, and he's in that part where he can't stand upright. And my father's yelling at him that he's useless. Does he want to go back to where he's just been brought from? And the boy's crying, saying, no, please don't take me back there. Please don't. Like, it was horrendous, whatever happened to him back there. Then my father said, do you want to see your family? And I'll never forget his voice, the hope. Yes. Can I see my family? Where are they? And my father's gone, out there where the farms are. And I heard like the drop in the voice. And next thing, I thought my father was punching him. But he had a knife. And every time he punched upwards with the knife, the boy would up and fall.
Oh, Nellie.
On the knife repeatedly. And after it, my father's flung the knife and said to one of the handlers, clean that mess up. And then I'm told not to stand in the blood. And a car has pulled up and I'm driven away. So before that happened, while I was still in Australia, I was taken on a big blow-up thing. I don't know what it was back then. It was said to be a hovercraft later when we arrived. and that it had the word zodiac on it, which I'll get to later, but that was laughed about and said, no, it's scrubbed off. And I remember waking up in it, and my little brother is with me as well, and we're being smashed up and down, floppy, and it's by bashing our head on the bottom of the said to be hovercraft later. We're woken up quite violently on the waves. So we've been put in that from another vessel or wherever. And we're in Antarctica. We've pulled up in Antarctica. I've never seen anything like it before. Snow everywhere, ice where we first got out on, told not to slip on the ice, roughly pulled out. There's other handlers in the craft, others there waiting to meet us. We're underdressed, my little brother and I. The handlers all have big puffer jackets on, big puffy black, they're all wearing black. Put in what's called a snow buggy of some type. My little brother was put in the back seat. I was put in the left-hand side, and the right-hand side had a really awful handler, older man, black hair, browner skin. Could have been the CIA man's son, one of his. And the whole way we're driving over the snow, he's talking, keeping me awake. Every so often he's turned around because he has a mirror watching my little brother the whole time. He's checking the mirror, and he's turning around and he's pushing my little brother back when he's falling forward. I'm almost thinking I'm going to fall out. What's going to happen to me when I fall out? I can't fall out. There's no side to it. Next thing he's saying, look at that big, huge, snowy mountain, turned around the left-hand side of that and into like a huge camping dwelling where they've been going for a lot of their training. There's other scientists there, unwitting, that they've got under, all sorts of people. We're driven in and taken into a warmer room, thank goodness, because by then I was almost hypothermia. I felt like freezing cold. Gone into a place where there was red lanterns everywhere, red lanterns. And it's like a darker dwelling. Apart from the red lanterns, there's lots of men in there. And they're laughing about this silly Scotsman. He's in there, a man maybe in his 30s, older, like about my father's age. My father wasn't there, but I remember. I'm totally without him there. And then they are talking about giving this man, and I pick up my ears because I've heard the word lobotomy again. It's been talked about that he's going to get a lobotomy. He's just standing there. There's like said to be a kind of bar thing, like a bar or something. He's just standing there. Next thing I can remember, being given signals and everything, and I'm taken over to him and I assume the position. And I can remember him going, oh gosh, no, please don't. Like he's going into shock about what's like, the pulled his trousers down, they're laughing. He's in absolute shock about what he's being forced to stand there and endure. And then I've just blacked out. But before that, I've been told that you are now a full beta slave. Full beta slave.
Oh my God, it's just astonishing to think the control that they have, even over the vessels, to be able to transport children.
Yeah, and they were calling him the Flying Scotsman, that he'd be the Flying Scotsman after what they were going to be doing to him. It was LSD, all sorts of stuff to blow his mind. Yeah. So then I was told, back then I was still at the Catholic school in the second town that I had lived in. We've come out of church one day and been told right then and then that we're moving town again, moving to a bigger town. So this is a bigger town with a bigger school. Everything's done in increments that the men would have to get under. So it's gone from a relatively small school to now a school of maybe 600 to 800 students, and they need to manage this, which is a much bigger operation. So they have more men helping. Things start to get a little bit more operational. than what I've talked about in the past. So they're actually advancing.
Expanded operations.
My father is now a guidance counsellor, which frees up his time. Prior to that, many things that he was going to do with other things and training of the men happened in school holidays, or when his smaller school class was put under and they could swap him out for other men to take over his class or other people, and no one even would know. They said that their men were ever away from any of their jobs. That's how organised it was. There was always a cover. People would lose time. Yeah. So that was always done.
Makes you wonder whether your dad was getting promoted within. He'd been doing well and just, taking on more and more responsibility as this operation's growing. And
that's how it works. Yeah, the more things they do, they have to get a certain quota of certain types of things. Once they've done those, they advance to the next, and then the next, and the next. It's all different keys that open more different knowledge of the drugging that they use, more things that they do. So you're getting more knowledge, basically, of how to do things, and more manpower to help you do it. You can start choosing how you want to do a kill, who you want to do it to. You get more choice that way, all that kind of thing. Yeah. So I arrived at the new house, and within a couple of days, the koala that I'd brought with me that I was allowed to bring was thrown away, and my mother told me that she'd thrown that dirty old thing out. So that was my last connection with the last place, basically. No more connection with the town that I'd just been moved from.
Wow. Yeah. And that was just after the big
Except for one thing. So I was taken back for one thing after I moved around that time, to do with the nun. They had her in her own dwelling, which was connected to the church. I was brought in. There was Pisani's imposter there, my father. They electric shocked her, and then they made, of all things, me perform a sex act with her, on her, as part of my beta slave training, which was horrendous.
So horrific.
And also it was said that she bit off part of her tongue, and they were laughing at that, and picked up a piece that looked like a tongue. I don't know whether she had, or whether they were just trying to invent that to make me have more horror, and picked up and laughed at it and put it on her bedside night table, laughing that she'd bitten off a piece of her tongue. Whether it was, or whether it was them faking it, I don't know. But they would often change things around, switch things around, make up things, or it would be the real thing, usually the real thing.
What monsters. And I think that was the one teacher that you really had a good relationship with as well. So how horrific for you to watch someone that you cared about, and someone that, cared about you, being tortured as well. It's just awful.
It was horrendous. And it was the first time I ever saw her without her habit on as well. And I didn't even know that she had red hair. So it was the first time I'd ever seen her without her habit on. And there's no words. So a family member told me that he and other members of the organisation that based themselves in New Zealand in the early days were responsible for one of New Zealand's biggest murder cases, and one of the first ones that they committed in their home country, or the country that they lived in then. That led to an innocent man being blamed for it and doing a lot of jail time.
Oh, wow.
And there was connections with that man's name in a older case, the Yorkshire Ripper, that my father said he was involved with years ago. Similar sounding name, which is why that was also set up for that person. I won't go into details about that, but the police have those statements. And that family member was responsible for wrapping the woman's body in copper wire I was apparently taken to that. I was 6 months old. So this is how early they will take.
6 months.
6 months. Yeah.
So even as a baby, you had that
Baby, I was taken to that, and yeah, in the room when it happened. That an auntie had fed a baby that was there. So they had an auntie. This is an organisation that has aunties that come in to mind children and look after children at times in their murders. They have aunties trained up. And through my life, I've met a few of these aunties, fully trained, that will pass babies over to people that are being pushed off bridges and things like that, and make it look like the family member has committed suicide and taken the baby with them, things like that. Like many, many things I was taken to. So yeah, so this is kind of like where I'm leading to, who this organisation is. And they get away with it with the use of all types of drugs that I've talked about. They've been around for a long time. One of their original leaders was responsible for the murder of the case that was called the Black Dahlia back in the 40s. So this is the origins of where they've come from, using these methods that have got more and more perfected over time. And they hate humanity. They hate tourism, tourists, families, all of that. They want to change systems and structures of how the world is run. This is the crazed way that they talk and think that they are going to be doing this. They can get into any high secured environment that they want through their methods and their manpower. They just live to kill. They don't enjoy life apart from killing. Everything is a cover. They will still spend Christmases with people and all that as a cover and all of that. But yeah, this is what they do. So they call themselves the Trinity of God. So the origins of them go back to the Black Dahlia, and then they became a well-known group that everyone thought was one person called the Zodiac Killer, which is why I'm going to get to the meaning, the perfect timing, the perfect clock. The Zodiac hovercraft that was said to have Zodiac scrubbed off it when I was 9. It's not one person as everyone thought. It's actually 3 people, because that gives them longevity in case one had a heart attack or one got accidentally killed, even though everywhere they go, the leaders, the 3 heads, are always surrounded and always extremely cared for. They are the ones that have the highest knowledge. Even with the Zodiac killings at one stage, my father was laughing and saying everyone was wondering about the fingerprint on the telephone. Well, that was a dead man's hand that they had sawn off and used that, an untraceable fingerprint, to put a fingerprint, because they love playing games with the police. So to grow up with this kind of men in your life was pure terror for me. This is how terrorizing these people are, these men, and how brutal they are. Completely brutal. Highly trained. They got certain MK Ultra files into their hands and went rogue with it, basically, and could do anything with what they studied. They studied non-stop. They had their meetings. They operate like this every day. Every day of their lives, it's all they're thinking about. So their motto is to collect souls and place them in the sky, like the Zodiac, the more they kill, the better, because that's lessening the population. My father told me in 2011 that one of the leaders, his God, they refer to everyone as God, or Cell, or Boss, or whatever, covers, names, all sorts of things. That their motto was to collect as many souls, put them in the sky, and that one of their leaders had done the maths in earlier decades and realised that the population couldn't sustain itself, which is what everyone knows and talks about now, but this was done a long time ago, and that he wanted to do something about it. To stop all tourism, planes adding to environmental damage, footprint on the earth, overpopulation, starvation, all that kind of thing. So they want to wipe the world clean and start again.
It's like a justification for their behavior, isn't it? That they're in some way doing something, but it's their horrific idea of what the world they want to create, a world without families, a world without connection, a world
without families, militarized, people born into different hierarchies, captivity, used as slaves, all that kind of thing. And they really believe they can do it in decades ahead. It's just already on their way. Yeah. So these men termed themselves my godfathers. I was always termed their goddaughter, which is like a mockery of everything that they mock about the world, including religion, the police, community, governments, everything. These are pure psychopaths, pure evil people, men. Yeah. They hate birth. They hate mothers. They see us as breeders. So I was always called a breeder. My mother was called a breeder. They make a profession out of killing. They make children into killers. I was often dressed in my pink maternity dress later on in my life when I was taken to certain child and baby killings. They would dress me in my pink maternity dress.
How horrific.
Yeah.
It's just a constant attack on the mother-child bond, isn't it? Because they know that that's so strong. Awful.
Yeah. Even because it comes from the 1940s and that when they started to really gain some momentum. Even as a teenager, at one stage, they dressed me in 1940s clothing, even shoes. So they're always making me part of that. And I used to wonder that, on one hand, it was alluding to that they would get off on, but also would make me stand out from my peers, make me look a little bit odd. Then maybe I would use that as a realization of why these men were around me that were sneering or giving me attention, staring at me, death staring at me, because I looked odd. So they will dress targets in clothes that look odd, as a way of keeping you under. And everything's like Groundhog Day. It's over and over and over. So eventually a family member took over the running of the Great White Brotherhood and all of that. And it was always said that they weren't running it properly, that it was going to come undone, all of that kind of thing. Yeah.
And the Great White Brotherhood is a huge cult operation, through multiple countries, in Australia as well.
And worldwide. They said that they were going into every country that mattered.
Yeah.
Countries of the world, they had their little pods set up. Now,
very much part of
it to start more.
Yeah, very much part of the New Age, and under that cover of, the Ascended Masters, and we're all love and light. And then
that's what they're called now.
Wow.
Years ago, they came up to me and said, my handler, at a protest I was at, and said, that they were now called the Ascension Masters, which is similar to the Zodiac. It's still the Ascension Masters ascending people into death, into the sky, collecting souls, Ascension Masters. So they always evolve their name and set up other cults underneath them. But they will never take the blame for anything. My father even told me many, many times that he would be off to have his eye operation. And I know what that means because in 1997, that was all talked about when I was taken to New Zealand for a horrific event. And they were saying, the leaders were saying to my father, we'll just put you out to pasture. No one will ever find any information out of you. You'll have a leucotomectomy, it was called by then, not lobotomy. They changed the wording. So that's their way of when they retire someone, once they've done enough training, they just put them with a leucotomy, and they can never have any information gotten out of them by anybody.
I suppose that keeps the operation safe. They don't want anyone having regrets or getting old and wanting to tell their story, trying to get rid of their regrets and leaking what the operations are. Wow.
That's another reason why there's such a abuse and attack of the genitals when you're younger and right through your life, because they hate birth, anything to do with birth. So they will attack the genital area with a vengeance as well.
So horrific.
They hate birth unless they're controlling it, unless they're doing the artificial inseminating of the breeders.
Yeah, I guess it really is, their operation is an attack on all organic life to change it into the manner that they want things to unfold. So it makes sense that birth and motherhood and family and children are targeted so very much.
Everything's done in a hierarchical order from the very top to the very bottom. And I'll get to more of that later on in sessions about who's advanced now and what they're doing and what they've done. And this is just the first decade that I've talked about. We've got 4 more.
Just so much for a child, before you're 10 years old, to have lived and experienced all of this horror.
And I've pleaded with the police to check for scopolamine when they're doing autopsies years ago, many statements ago. Check for scopolamine when you're doing autopsies on certain people, especially the ones I've come forward about in the past. I came forward so many times about the handlers stalking me, and the police just ignored it. They could have got them. They could have got them years ago. They were still stalking me. And the police just laughed at me and said, you need to go and see your doctor. Because at first, police would say, oh, what does he look like? And I'm like, no, there's many of them. There's a lot of them. They look like this, they look like this. And they would just look at me and laugh. Like the whole place would laugh and say, you need to go and see your doctor. So they wouldn't listen. And I was getting things done to me like people programmed to throw wine bottles at my head, chase me, ram my car, pull up next to me all the time, stalking me. It was nonstop. By the time I was really aware of them, that have brought me out into more awareness, they just knew that the police would just ignore me.
And that's another form of just being horrifically silenced, isn't it? When you try and do the right thing, you've tried to make a report, you've tried to do everything you can to protect the communities and get this truth out and seek justice. When the police, a service to our community, supposedly ignores all of your claims without investigating them, that's just so heartbreaking for a survivor.
Yeah, they just look at mankind as wasting intelligence. They make a mockery of them. They don't see any point in having a nice time, enjoying life, doing nice things, forming relationships, forming communities, having families. They want to change all that. They want to make it hell for people, hell on earth, except for them. Survival of the fittest. the ones with the most knowledge that can do this and get away with it. And they laugh at police because they know that police have locked up so many innocent people that they've placed as patsies. And they'd even do things like I'd be taken along with other children, certain children, and say a particular child through a doctor has a script to have 23 vials of blood taken from them.
What?
Mm-hmm. And they would use this blood. They were just showing me that they could get blood out of anybody, keep it on file, and then spray the blood around at a murder scene and make it look like that person had committed the murder. Yeah. Or even a victim's blood sprayed around at somebody's place to make it look like that person had killed that person there and there's no body, or the body's found later. But they will collect blood before the happening with people under scopolamine that don't even know that blood has been collected off them to be used in future events.
So much planning and forward thought, isn't there? It's just like they've got every base covered. They've got so many different options that they can run with to incriminate the wrong person and cover up their own crimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are military types. They want war. They will create war. Yeah. That was said to me. They have delusions of grandeur, and that's what they exude around you, these delusions, these men that are just in such a heightened state with delusions of grandeur but they get away with it. So they know that it's possible for them to do everything that they're not delusions, they're doing it. But they act in a kind of a grand manner like they are God around you. Yeah, it's awful to be in their company, like have them around you. It's like shock, horror, terror, everything at once. What's going to happen? What's next?
Just the anxiety of not knowing what's coming as well, like as a young child. It's just horrific.
And with the satanic ritual killing field that I was last taken to in 2011, my father said that even the owners of that, and whether it had passed hands or whatever, didn't even know that it looked like that they had got their men to program people, done all their flyover with the designing and of the whole land to make it look like that, and that the people that owned it weren't even aware at first that that's what it looked like, if at all.
Wow. I just had no idea.
Design big blocks of land to look a certain way to make their mark on the world and create fear and different meanings, and people that own the properties aren't even aware. They're just programmed to put this there and make this there and that there, but they don't know what it looks like from above. You wouldn't
be thinking that.
So my father would always bring me out to horror, and he'd often know before something was going to be on TV. Back in those days, we only had 1 or 2 stations, 2 later, 1 at first. And I remember he was very excited. He brought me out to stand in front of the TV and he's like, watch what's about to come on, watch what's about to come on. And it was a monkey with the top of its head being taken or sliced off. And then it was torched and cooking its brains. And he was saying things to me like, we're going to make you into one of them. We're going to make you into one of them. Then apparently the brains back then would get eaten in that country, wherever it was. It was something on TV about it. But I always remember he knew before it was coming on.
Wow.
They were controlling what to put on the TV back there, even then in New Zealand, with getting whoever was running the TV show under and programming them to put it on, or even that.
Wow. And you can see how what's being screened on TV could be used within generational families as a programming tool, as well as obviously traumatizing people at large, because it's just horrific content that doesn't need to be on when children can see this kind of thing, full stop. But yeah, to see how a generational family would use that as a programming, as a fear tool as well. Wow.
Yeah, horrendous. And then he'd tell me horrific things like that. He was one of the ones involved in the shooting. This is before I was born, when he was still over there, in the 60s, quite a few years. That he was one of the ones involved in the shooting of a president. And the way that they did it was, he was one of the shooters. He was up a tree. The ice cream cart in front of them had all drugged ice creams. So everyone around there was handed the free ice creams. Everyone ate them. Everyone was under, so that he was basically invisible, and he was on a fence to start with. Then he was in the tree. Then he was the shooter. And then he had men behind him to take him away after it. And that's how easy it was. And this was blamed on somebody else. That's how easy it was. So that was one of his entry points into the organisation that he had to prove himself with. But he'd already been doing a lot of things before that.
So there's this constant progression. They're given a task, they succeed at that. They're given a bigger task, more responsibility. Yep. Wow, it's just so thought out, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'd often talk about their leaders and him and other men all intertwined as one, like as one head, which was kind of weird, but they are all indoctrinated with the same thing, so that if one person dies or whatever, there's others already there to take their place. So this is for longevity, so that their organisation would never die or ever get, would ever stop. Yeah, and they talk, which I'll get to more in later sessions, more about the cryptic codes and things that they use in their killings, because they do a lot of cryptic meanings, which they drove me crazy a few years ago with doing, when they were teaching me and training me what some of the murders in the everyday world meant, and all the mockery that they were using, which is quite horrific, with names and places all having hidden meanings, or when you see it, you can see it, how they think. They're all psychopaths trained in the psychopathic mind. They use repetitions of names in different killings, so there might be killings decades earlier. They'll use a repetition. They'll change the role of the person, whether it's a perpetrator, whether it's a murder victim, whether it's a journalist, whether it's a policeman. They'll all have similar names over different decades. So they're always bringing back their little mementos into their latest killing as a glorification of this, because this is how their minds work, different from ours, different from most people's. It's like, which is why they said that most people don't kill, and they have to change, which is what I'm going to get to in next session, how they manage to change the psyche of the public mindset into thinking that a mother could kill her own baby, and then make cartoons and jokes about it. So I was taken to that as well. Yeah. And how they did it, and how important that was for future generations of their killers being able to kill children and babies, and make it look like nowadays it's quite common to see that mothers and fathers can kill their own children, family members can kill each other, whereas way back then it wasn't very common. So they needed something big to bring into the public mindset, so that the public would be swayed by the media also. Oh my gosh, this can really happen, and a lot of conversation about it. They can program police to go the mother and father, which they have done in a few of their killings, to make them out to be the perpetrators, wrecked by the media. Not only do they lose their own child, then they're made out to look, or even be jailed for the crime. And they've done this many times. and I've been taken to quite a few of them. This is a sickness
Wow.
people operate under.
It's a really important point that you brought up there, is how it is these same cults that are using this technology, these tools and techniques on individuals to create mind control slaves that are actually in control of programming our society. And that's all, you know, the conditioning is setting up and allowing the complete degradation of the world that we live in, and these crimes to, you know, start becoming more prolific, and, you know, child rape and pedophilia starting to, you know, come out in more and more and more. And that's just been their tactics over the decades and decades and decades that they've set this up to keep themselves concealed by changing the world around them and bringing us down into their horrific evil as well.
That's right. That's what they do. And they've achieved a lot of that so far, a lot of it. And yeah, it's still not over for them. They're still going for more than just that, which I'll get to in more sessions.
Thank you so much, Nellie, for bravely sharing. Like, your story it just astounds me. You've lived through so much. We've just went from 0 to 10 years, and, you know, the amount of horror as a child that you've witnessed and lived through. You know, I just want to give you a huge hug, and I thank you so much for bravely and courageously speaking out about what you've remembered to help other survivors, and help our communities understand, you know, these tools and what's being used against us, because it's only through us understanding and exposing this that we have the opportunity to stop this from happening. It's just been hidden for way too long. And, you know, I just wanted to honor all the children that are no longer here. You know, when you spoke about that little boy before, you know, really brings it home. It's the children that are lost during this programming, and it's also the children that are taken out you know, during rituals. And, you know, we don't have names for these children often. You know, who knows what that happens in their final hours. It's been so hidden. So I thank you for sharing, you know, such a heartbreaking trauma, you know, to honor, you know, just some of the children that we've lost as well. And I know survivors are getting so very much from hearing, you know, the incredible recollections you've had of your own memories. So thank you so much for speaking out, and we're with you, we support you, we believe you.
Thank you, Gabbi. Thank you. See you next session.
We'll chat soon.